our Buddy Practice team sharing God's word with us. So I want you to give Kerry a big hand to come to see with us.
G'day. It's really a pretty brave and rare thing that Bruce and Steve and the rest of the leadership team allow people from the congregation to come up and speak in front of the church. Most churches wouldn't allow that to happen unless the person had quite a lot of theological training or something like that. And, they're taking a big risk. For all they know, a nutty kook could be up here. Someone with extreme views on things. And somewhere in between, that's where I come in. So I've really struggled with preparing today's sermon. For example, I wrote out a couple of introductions that I was going to use today. And but after reflection, I realised all I was really doing was trying to show off what I knew and trying to show off how clever I could be with stuff. And, that's just not on. That's no good. That's rottenness. It's no good anywhere in life, and it's worse still when it's in here, standing where I'm standing. So the only introduction you're going to get from me today is one that says I'm not really worthy to be here at all. But I am here, and I believe I'm actually meant to be here.
Yeah. And
I believe I have a message that is meant for the church today.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to look at the Letter of Jude. It's one of the most intense and confronting books of the Bible. Really, really easy for you to navigate with me today. All you've got to do is find the last book in the Bible and go one back, and you're in Jude. Tiny little letter. This book I'm going to be reading it out of the Amplified version of the Bible, just because it helps tease out a lot of the detail that's there. It makes it a bit easier for us to get through some of the nuances in the small amount of time we've got available. From Jude, we're going to get a strong message to hold fast to our faith, to fight for it and to contend for it, keeping it pure. The content is primarily about the subject of apostasy. Apostasy is the abandonment of your faith, to walk away from it, to renounce what you're about, to renounce your Christianity. And God judges that extremely harshly. God expects us to know what apostasy is and how to recognise it when it's happening. Jude's going to give us the knowledge we need to be able to do those things. Jude's also going to tell us that apostasy is a particular issue for the last days churches. And I believe that we're in the last days, and so if I'm right about that, this is a really pertinent message for us today.
Yeah.
Okay, so verse 1. Jude, a servant of Jesus Christ, the Messiah, and brother of James, writes this letter to those who are called, chosen, dearly loved by the Father, and set apart and kept for Jesus Christ. How many people here know that Jude is an English name for Judas? Some people already knew that. Wow, not many. I didn't know that either. I was surprised I didn't know that. I thought that would have been something that you would know. But what it is Judas is a common name in the old 2,000 years ago, because it was the Greek version of the word Judah. So we shouldn't be surprised that there are two Judases in the New Testament that are so prominent. The first one being the traitor Judas Iscariot, that we all know fairly well, and this guy here, who is a different guy, same name. But the English translators decided to make it a bit easier for us, and that is calling him Jude all the way through, so we won't get confused. So this guy is the brother of James. That means he was also the earthly brother of Jesus. But he doesn't mention that here, he doesn't bother, because it's actually not a big deal. What is a big deal is the fact that he's a bond slave of Jesus Christ. That's a far bigger deal.
Yeah.
This letter is addressed to believers. So if you're sitting here today and you're not a believer, you might find some of this a bit hard. But I pray that God's going to speak to you anyway.
Yeah.
This is what Jude is saying to the Christians. May mercy, soul peace, and love be multiplied to you. Beloved, my whole concern was to write to you in regard to a common salvation. But I found it necessary and was impelled to write to you and urgently appeal to exhort you to contend for the faith which was once handed down to the saints, the faith which is the sum of the Christian belief, which was delivered verbally to the whole people of God. So when I started preparing the sermon, I thought I knew what I was going to be talking about to you guys. But as I was doing all my study and prep for it, I realised that, I want to talk about this stuff, but it's not really what God wanted me to talk about. And Jude faces the same thing here. He wants to talk about the salvation message, but he can't. He can't because there's apostasy going on, and he needs to identify, he needs to let people know. Verse 4, for certain men have crept in silently, gaining entrance secretly by a side door. Their doom was predicted long ago. Ungodly, impious, profane persons who pervert the grace, the spiritual blessing and favour of our God into lawlessness and wantonness and immorality, and disown and deny our sole Master and Lord, Jesus Christ, Messiah, the Anointed One. Now in verse 5, Jude starts giving us a bit of a lesson in apostasy from history. Now I want to remind you, though you were fully informed once for all, that though the Lord at one time delivered a people out of the land of Egypt, he subsequently destroyed those of them who did not believe, who refused to adhere to trust in, and to rely upon him. So in verse 5, we're being reminded afresh about the story of Israel being delivered out of Egypt, where they've been enslaved. You can read more about that in Exodus and Numbers, but we're just going to deal with it very briefly here. God mightily delivered the nation. He performed signs and wonders, but the people who he delivered, the people who he had loved, ended up just rejecting God while they were in the wilderness. Paul writes about this really well. This is the only bit we're going to veer away from Jude for a minute. We're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10. There they were protected under the... Paul writes that they were protected under the cloud of God's presence and passed safely through the Red Sea. Paul goes so far to say that this meant that each one of them was effectively baptized into Moses and in the cloud and in the sea. And they were thus brought under obligation to the law, to Moses, and to the covenant, consecrated and set apart to the service of God. And all of them ate the same spiritual, supernaturally given food. And they all drank the same supernaturally given drink, for they drank from a spiritual rock that was Jesus Christ. That's what Paul tells us. So who else notices here that this is actually parallel to the church? This is the parallel to Christians. These guys are like a bunch of Christians. Just like Christians, they were all baptized by water and by a spirit. They were fed by the supernatural. They drank from the rock, which was Jesus Christ himself. But in verse 5 of 1 Corinthians 10 it reads, nevertheless, God was not pleased with the great majority of them, for they were overthrown and strewn down along the ground in the wilderness. Now these things are examples, warnings and admonitions for us, not to desire or crave or covet or lust after evil and carnal things as they did. Do not be worshippers of false gods, as some of them were. As is written, people sat down to eat and drink the sacrifices offered to the golden calf at Horeb, and rose to sport, to dance, and to give way to jesting and hilarity. We must not gratify evil desire and indulge in immorality as some of them did, and 23,000 of them suddenly fell dead in a single day. We should not tempt the Lord, try his patience, become a trial to him, critically appraise him, and exploit his goodness as some of them did and were killed by poisonous serpents. Nor discontentedly complain as some of them did and were put out of the way entirely by the destroyer, death. Heavy stuff. Both Paul and Jude are warning us here that just because we are baptized, just because we appear to be spiritual, doesn't mean that we're necessarily safe from the wrath of God.